Get out of my house before I call the police. Mom, you're losing your mind. This is our house now. Then explain this letter from your dead father. The silence in that courtroom was deafening when I slammed that envelope down on the table. My own daughter's face went white as snow. My son started stuttering like a guilty child caught stealing cookies. And their expensive lawyer? He just stared at that handwriting like he'd seen a ghost. You see, for 6 months, my children thought they had me beaten. They thought their 64-year-old mother was too grief-stricken and confused to fight back. They thought I'd just roll over and let them steal everything their father and I built over 40 years of marriage. But Harold always said I was the strongest woman he knew. And dead or alive, that man was about to prove it. My name is Dorothy, and I've been married to Harold Trent for 42 years when he passed away last year. We built our life from nothing. Harold worked double shifts at the funeral while I cleaned houses and watched neighbors' kids to make ends meet. When we finally saved enough to buy our first rental property, a little duplex on Maple Street, Harold kissed my forehead and said, "Dot, we're going to build something that lasts forever." And we did. Over the decades, we accumulated 17 rental properties across 3 counties. Harold handled the repairs and tenant relationships while I managed the books and dealt with the banks. We never took vacations, never bought fancy cars, never lived beyond our means. Every penny went back into growing our little real estate empire. Our 2 children, Patricia and Robert, grew up watching us work. Patricia became a real estate agent, and Robert went into finance. We were so proud. We thought we'd raised kids who understood the value of hard work and family loyalty. Harold and I talked constantly about leaving everything to them equally. "They'll take care of each other," Harold would say, "and they'll take care of you when I'm gone." 3 years ago, Harold was diagnosed with lung cancer. The treatments were brutal, but I never left his side. Patricia and Robert visited occasionally, but they seemed more interested in asking about the properties than about their father's pain levels or doctor appointments. That should have been my first warning sign. Harold died on a Tuesday morning in March. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath, and I swear I felt part of my soul leave with him. The funeral was beautiful. Patricia handled most of the arrangements, and I was grateful. I was too numb with grief to make decisions about flowers and caskets and church programs. But exactly 1 week after we buried Harold, Patricia knocked on my door with a folder full of papers. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's will," she said, settling herself at my kitchen table like she owned the place. "Robert and I have been going through everything, and honestly, we're worried about you managing all these properties alone." That's when I realized Patricia had keys to my house that I'd never given her. "I can manage just fine," I told her. "Your father and I ran this business together for decades." Patricia exchanged a look with Robert, who'd apparently been waiting in the driveway. "Mom, you're 64 years old. Dad handled all the tenant calls, all the repairs, all the heavy lifting. You just did the books." Just did the books? I could feel my blood pressure rising. "I negotiated every mortgage, tracked every expense, handled every eviction notice, and built the spreadsheets that turned your father's handyman jobs into $1 million portfolio." Robert cleared his throat. "The thing is, Mom, we think it would be better if you transferred the properties to us. We can handle everything, and you can just relax." I stared at my children, my own flesh and blood, sitting in my kitchen, trying to convince me to hand over my life's work like I was some confused old lady who couldn't balance a checkbook. But I made one mistake. I trusted them. Over the next few months, Patricia started showing up unannounced to help with paperwork. She'd bring coffee and pastries, acting like the devoted daughter, while subtly questioning every decision I made. Mom, did you really approve that rent increase for the Johnson property? That seems aggressive. Mom, why are you spending so much on repairs for the Oak Street duplex? Maybe we should just sell it. Mom, I noticed you're still doing all the banking in person. Wouldn't online banking be easier? What I discovered next left me speechless. I found out Patricia had been calling my tenants directly, telling them that I was getting older and that they should contact her with any issues instead of me. 3 of my longest term tenants mentioned this during routine visits, clearly uncomfortable about going behind my back. But she made one mistake. She didn't know that Harold and I had always kept detailed records of every phone call, every interaction, every decision. I had documentation going back 20 years. When I confronted Patricia about contacting my tenants, she didn't even deny it. Mom, I was just trying to help. You seem overwhelmed lately. Overwhelmed? I've been managing these properties since before you graduated high school. But, Mom, you're forgetting things. Last week, you asked me the same question 3 times about the insurance renewal. I knew that was a lie. But suddenly, I understood what was happening. Patricia was creating a narrative that I was losing my mental faculties, that I needed my children to step in and save me from myself. That's when I realized Harold's absence had made me vulnerable in ways I never imagined. The pressure intensified. Robert started showing up to property inspections uninvited, introducing himself to tenants as the new co-manager. Patricia began questioning my spending on everything from property taxes to maintenance supplies. They had a plan, and I was watching it unfold in real time. But what I discovered about their father's final months would change everything. The breaking point came 6 months after Harold's funeral. Patricia called a family meeting at the lawyer's office, the same office where Harold and I had drafted our will 15 years earlier. I walked into that conference room expecting to discuss property management transition plans. Instead, I found Patricia, Robert, and a lawyer I'd never seen before, sitting across from me like a tribunal. Mrs. Chen, the lawyer began, your children have expressed serious concerns about your ability to manage your assets safely. What assets? I asked, though my heart was already sinking. Patricia slid a stack of papers across the table. Mom, we've filed for conservatorship. We think it's best if Robert and I handle the properties from now on. I stared at those papers. Legal documents claiming I was mentally incompetent, financially irresponsible, and incapable of making sound decisions. They had medical evidence from a doctor I'd never met, financial proof of my declining judgment, and witness statements from people claiming they'd observed my confusion and memory problems. This is insane, I whispered. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Mom, Robert said gently, you called me last month asking about Dad's cancer treatment costs. We buried Dad 6 months ago. Another lie. I had called Robert asking about the insurance reimbursement plan, not about Harold's treatment. But in that moment, I realized there had been documenting and twisting every conversation we'd had for months. We're not doing this to hurt you, Patricia added. We're doing this because we love you. Let us take care of everything so you can focus on healing from Dad's death. The lawyer, their lawyer, not ours, explained that the conservatorship would transfer all property management decisions to my children. They would handle rent collection, maintenance, buying, selling, everything. I would receive a monthly allowance for my personal expenses, an allowance from my own money for properties I had built. I need time to think about this, I said, standing up on shaking legs. Mom, Patricia's voice had an edge now. The petition has already been filed. The court date is next Wednesday. I walked out of that conference room knowing I had 7 days to fight for my life's work. But that night, something incredible happened. I was going through Harold's desk drawers, looking for our original property deeds, when I found a manila envelope I'd never seen before. Written on the front in Harold's careful handwriting were the words, "For Dorothy, open only if our children break your heart." Inside was a letter dated just 3 weeks before Harold died, along with copies of documents I didn't even know existed. The letter began, "My darling Dot, if you're reading this, then Patricia and Robert have shown their true colors. I pray you never have to open this envelope, but if you do, everything you need is inside." Harold had suspected our children's intentions long before I did. During his final months, while I was focused on his medical care, he had been quietly documenting conversations with Patricia and Robert that revealed their real plans. He had recordings, actual audio recordings, of Patricia and Robert discussing their strategy to have me declared incompetent. He had copies of emails between them detailing how to manage Mom's decline and accelerate the transition. He had documentation of their meetings with financial advisors about, but the most devastating evidence was a notarized statement from Harold, written in his own hand, declaring his complete confidence in my mental abilities and explicitly stating that any attempt by our children to claim otherwise would be a betrayal of everything we built together. The final page of the letter read, "Dorothy Chen is the smartest, strongest, most capable woman I've ever known. She doesn't need our children to manage her affairs. They need her wisdom to avoid destroying what we built. If they can't see that, they don't deserve what we're leaving them." Harold had also changed our will without telling me. Instead of leaving everything jointly to Patricia and Robert, he had established a trust with me as the sole trustee. Our children would inherit the properties eventually, but only if they treated me with respect and included me in all major decisions until my death. If they tried to have me declared incompetent or attempted to force me out of management decisions, they would forfeit their inheritance entirely. Everything would go to charity. Wednesday morning, I walked into that courtroom carrying Harold's envelope and 40 years of righteous fury. The courtroom was packed. Patricia and Robert sat with their lawyer, looking confident and rehearsed. They had no idea what was coming. When the judge asked me to respond to the conservatorship petition, I stood up and said, "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that this petition is based on fraud and manipulation." I placed Harold's envelope on the evidence table and watched my children's faces change as I began reading their father's letter aloud. "Patricia and Robert have forgotten that respect and love are earned, not inherited," I read in my strongest voice. "They have chosen greed over gratitude, manipulation over honesty." The recordings were damning. Patricia's voice, clear as day, saying, "We just need to make Mom look confused and overwhelmed. Document everything that could be seen as memory problems." Robert's voice responding, "The sooner we get control of those properties, the sooner we can start selling off the underperforming ones." Their lawyer tried to object, but Harold had been thorough. Every recording was legally obtained. Every document was properly notarized. Every piece of evidence was bulletproof. The judge listened to 20 minutes of my own children discussing me like I was already dead, planning to strip away my independence and dignity for their financial gain. When the evidence presentation ended, the courtroom was silent, except for Patricia's quiet crying. Motion denied, the judge said firmly. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of potential elder abuse and fraud. But the real justice came 3 months later. The local newspaper ran a front page story about the case, titled Local Real Estate Agents Attempt to Defraud Elderly Mother. Patricia's real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Robert's financial services firm quietly let him go to avoid association with the scandal. Both of their marriages fell apart when their spouses realized what kind of people they'd married. Patricia's husband filed for divorce, citing fundamental differences in character. Robert's wife moved back to her mother's house with their 2 children. The rental property business thrived under my management. Without Harold's physical limitations, I was able to implement efficiency improvements we'd discussed for years. Profits increased 40% in the first year after his death. I hired a property management company to handle maintenance calls and emergency repairs, but I kept control of all financial decisions, tenant relationships, and strategic planning. Turns out, the confused old lady was perfectly capable of running a successful business empire. Patricia and Robert tried to reconcile several times, but their apologies always came with conditions. We're sorry, Mom, but you have to understand we were just worried about you. We made mistakes, but we still think you need help managing everything. They never took full responsibility. They never acknowledged that their actions were calculated and cruel. They never admitted that they had tried to steal my independence, my dignity, and my life's work. So I never forgave them. Last Christmas, I got cards from both of them. Generic store-bought cards with generic messages about family healing and moving forward. I threw them in the trash and spent the holiday with my tenants who had become like family to me over the years. We had dinner at Mrs. Rodriguez's house, and she toasted the strongest landlady in 3 counties. Today, I'm 66 years old, and I manage 17 rental properties across 3 counties entirely on my own. I wake up every morning grateful for Harold's wisdom and protection, even from beyond the grave. My children thought they could exploit my grief and trust to steal what wasn't to. My children thought they could exploit my grief and trust to steal what wasn't theirs. They thought being family meant they could betray me without consequences. They thought wrong. Here's what I learned from this experience. Your children don't automatically deserve your blind trust just because you raised them. Love should never mean accepting abuse, and being older doesn't make you weak. It makes you experienced enough to recognize manipulation when you see it. If Harold hadn't left me that letter, I might have spent my golden years as a prisoner in my own life, watching my children destroy everything we built while telling myself they meant well. Instead, I learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones willing to hurt you the deepest. I still love Patricia and Robert. They're my children, and that will never change. But I don't trust them. I don't need them, and I certainly don't owe them my forgiveness just because we share DNA. The rental business will go to charity when I die, just as Harold planned. There are dozens of organizations that help elderly people fight elder abuse, support widows starting over, and provide affordable housing for working families. My children chose greed over love, manipulation over honesty, betrayal over loyalty. Now they get to live with those choices. As for me, I wake up every morning in the house Harold and I bought 40 years ago, surrounded by the success we built together, protected by the love he left behind. I sleep peacefully, knowing that I fought for what was mine and won. And I smile every time I remember Patricia's face when she heard her father's voice on that recording, telling the truth she thought was buried with him. Some people think death ends a marriage. Harold proved that true love protects you forever. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and comment your thoughts. I read every comment, and your support means everything to me. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that it's never too late to fight for what's rightfully yours. Remember, respect is earned, not inherited. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand up to the people who think they know you best. Thank you for listening to my story. Until next time, stay strong.